Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This will be my full House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 6 video. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references, so we'll break it all down. Everybody grab your swords, let's go. We're passing out dragons like candy. If you ever wanted to fly on a dragon, now is the time to try. The actual episode title is The Black Queen, which is a reference to what she's called in the Fire and Blood book that this is all based on, covering the Dance of the Dragons. They did finally change the intro scene of the tapestry, but it took them a couple episodes to add all the Rook's Rest stuff. They added a scene covering basically the actual battle itself, what happened with Sunfire, Vhagar, and melees with Rhaenys. Kind of expected them to add this in last week's episode, not sure why they waited so long to actually add it. This scene here is meant to be all the dead blacks and greens at the battle, then it changes to the two dragons and their riders Rhaenys, melees, Aegon, Sunfire, with melee's blood pouring out towards the Iron Throne because of its death. R.I.P. The actual opening scene starts with Jason Lannister's army arriving at the Golden Tooth from the Westerlands. The Golden Tooth is like the major hub of trade between the West and the East. It's this huge route here. They also play the Lannister theme music from the original Game of Thrones series. There's a lot of theme music from the original Game of Thrones series during different specific episodes here, particularly Daenerys' theme music and a couple other characters. When he mentions the Red Fork, that's just the juncture here that runs right through the middle of the Riverlands and all the great houses.
By the time we are finished with the Riverland scum, the Red Fork will have earned its name.
The Lannister army, as they mentioned earlier this season, was heading to the Riverlands. It was just going to take a while to get there, with the goal of first retaking Harrenhal, just because that's what Aemon is obsessed with right now. But they have a bit of a joke where he says he won't actually march on Harrenhal until Aemon shows up on Vhagar, kind of sing-songy like he's ordering Aemon to do it, like I'm not going to move a finger until Aemon shows up on his giant dragon. Who we find out is very pissed off because he doesn't want to leave King's Landing undefended. Vhagar is currently the biggest deterrent to Rhaenyra and Daemon the Blacks just coming right for King's Landing, and also he's kind of just flat out pissed that the Lannisters are trying to order him to the Riverlands, like, how dare you order me, I'm supposed to be the king right now. There are a couple reminders of that throughout the episode from a bunch of different characters on different sides of this war here, where they refer to him as King Regent, just to remind you that he's not the actual king, he's just King Regent. He tells the Green Council that he wants to make an alliance with the Triarchy in the Free Cities in order to gain access to their fleet, with the goal of them ending Corlys Velaryon's blockade of King's Landing, which has been causing a lot of food shortages, leading to the riots that we see in this episode. A lot of people also asking about this too, like, why doesn't Highgarden send food? Because that was a big thing during the original Game of Thrones series. Highgarden is obviously very loyal to the Greens right now. Why aren't they sending any supplies? They haven't really got into that. Otto Hightower was sent by Alicent to Highgarden, so hopefully when they bring his storyline back into the main story, they'll actually answer that question. There are several mentions of Otto Hightower during this episode. Notice how Aemon cuts off Alicent, ignoring when she's giving advice, like he absolutely does not care, will not listen to a thing that she says. She tries to remind him that his father, Viserys, didn't trust the Triarchy. They're unreliable, not trustworthy, they could potentially turn on them if it suits them. In the current backup plan that she had come up with, the Greyjoys, with their fleet, have not answered any of the Greens' requests for help. When they mention the Red Kraken, that's Dalton Greyjoy, the Lord of House Greyjoy during the Dance of the Dragons, saying that he's, quote-unquote, just waiting to see who comes out on top to support them. When they suggest that they offer Alicent's hand in marriage to him in order to secure an alliance with the Greyjoys, that's a callback to the original Game of Thrones series when Cersei had to make the exact same promise in order to get Euron Greyjoy's fleet. Even though we love to make fun of Criston Cole at every possible turn, he does speak up for Alicent during this speech here. Maybe because he doesn't want her to get married to Dalton Greyjoy, maybe because he's trying to be a good person, you can decide which. And even if Aemon doesn't totally know what was going on between the two of them, he gets kind of pissed off at Criston Cole too, like, how dare you try to give me advice, ordering him to Harrenhal with his smaller force now, which was severely weakened after the battle at Rook's Rest. He says he doesn't think he'd be able to challenge Daemon and Caraxes with their current forces right now, thinking that Daemon has been successful in amassing the River Lords into an actual army. They kind of implied that that's going to be the case towards the end of this episode, like he does have a solid chance of turning things around in the Riverlands for the Blacks. But Aemon's big idea here is to make Daemon fight a war on two fronts in the Riverlands.
My uncle is a challenge I welcome, if he dares face me.
Then he does reveal that he will show up on Vhagar at Harrenhal when, quote-unquote, the time is right, and he's looking forward to the challenge from his uncle. Like, if he challenges me, I'm looking forward to it. That's very big foreshadowing for something that will eventually happen at some point. It's meant to tie back to a lot of Daemon's spooky weirwood visions, not all of his visions, but some of his visions, particularly early on when he first arrived at Harrenhal and what Alice Rivers was telling him when he was around the weirwood tree. Don't want to get too deep into that because that is something they will probably do eventually on the show, but maybe not till like season 4. It just depends on how fast they blow through the plot. But Daemon's destiny does lie at the God's Eye. There's a lot of spooky magic and old gods talk coming from Alice Rivers in this episode about Daemon's destiny as well too, so don't worry, we'll get into that. Another really cool detail in the background you kind of notice too when they start panning around the room, Aemond is keeping the Valyrian sword Blackfire propped up against the small council table during the meeting. It had been passed down from Aegon the Conqueror to each next king, so when someone took the Iron Throne, they would also get Blackfire. Later in the episode, we actually see Viserys holding it inside one of Daemon's visions because of the scene from episode 1, season 1 that they were doing. But I think the reason why Aemond keeps it here in full view of the small council at the table, where Viserys probably did not, Jaehaerys also probably didn't, Aenys probably didn't, Maegor probably did keep it around him most of the time, but Aegon the Conqueror didn't really spend that much time in King's Landing after he conquered the Seven Kingdoms. That's like a whole other story that they'll get into when they actually do the prequel series all about Aegon's conquest. Most of his time after he was crowned king of the Seven Kingdoms, or the Six Kingdoms in Dorne, technically, because he didn't conquer Dorne, was spent on Dragonback, flying around from different great house to great house, trying to put down different uprisings in different areas. So just because he conquered the Six Kingdoms in Dorne didn't mean that the realm was at peace right after that. Like, it took the rest of his life to try and get everybody to chill out. So Aemond is basically keeping the sword here to intimidate the rest of the small council, like, don't speak out against me or I might chop your head off too. Alicent then stays behind to talk to him. He questions her presence in the small council. She reminds him about her work trying to rule in Viserys' stead during his final years, which she also talked to Aegon about before Rook's Rest. Aemond references Aegon as if he's unsure if he's going to survive, like, we'll see, who knows what's going to happen to him, ... Then he outright fires her, like, I do not want you here, you serve no purpose, I don't want your help, get out. She then questions him to his face as to whether or not he's just doing all these terrible things in present day because he hasn't gotten past all of his childhood trauma. Because you remember, growing up, his whole family picked on him from all sides. Both Rhaenyra's line and his inner family, like the Greens, picked on him a lot. So the implication is that a lot of his anger in present day is just childhood trauma that's just carried over to present day. The way they leave the conversation, it seems like it's a no. Like, nope, he's definitely still traumatized, still visiting all this trauma on everyone else now. Like I suffered, I'm going to make you all suffer now too. Then we see Corlys Velaryon clocking in as Hand of the Queen to Rhaenyra in front of the map table, putting the actual pin on. They play his theme music as everybody walks into the actual room. And the scroll Rhaenyra brings is all about the dragon seeds in Steffon Darklyn, his family line. She reveals that he has enough Valyrian blood in his veins to actually claim a dragon. She mentions Vermithor, Silverwing, Seasmoke, Rhaena to set up Rhaena's scene later in the episode. We'll talk about that too because it confirms some of my big theories about how they've changed her storyline. We find out Steffon Darklyn's tie to the Targaryens and the Valyrians, just in general, was his grandmother's grandmother was Arianna Targaryen, which goes back to the time of Aenar Targaryen, which is basically how the Valyrian blood was bred into his family line. He's a very noble warrior, very noble Kingsguard, so of course he's happy to try, but Rhaenyra tries to tell him, like, no, you need to be prepared because you might get eaten on the spot. Back at Harrenhal, we get Daemon's next spooky weirwood vision. This time he steps into the Iron Throne room, but it's the events of Season 1, Episode 1. At the very end of the episode, we see Viserys, so we finally get a Paddy Considine cameo scene. A lot of people wondering, because we were getting all these old Season 1 actors to come back and cameo for Season 2, if we see him come back at some point. So if you thought they were going to do this, pat yourself on the back.
Did you say it?
You can't possibly still be angry about this.
This was meant to be him chastising Daemon, hearing that he was casually joking about the death of his baby Aegon and his dead wife Aemma. He basically gives the exact same speech that he gave to him during episode 1. There are a couple minor changes after his speech, though, when he starts breaking down crying, taking the crown off. Daemon then tries to leave, finding that he's locked in the throne room. Part of this, I think, is meant to be a metaphor for how Daemon is stuck on the idea of the Iron Throne, like he's too obsessed with it and just can't leave it behind. Love the way they transition to his conversation with Simon Strong, too. All of his transitions from the Weirwood visions have been kind of like this, where he wakes up in the middle of a conversation with someone else. Like, wait a minute, what was I just doing? What's going on here? Love the way that he is clearly unhinged. Poor Simon Strong just trying to deal with it like, okay, got it, buddy. Not gonna mess with you anymore, not gonna look at you funny, not gonna watch you. Then we get a new look at Harrenhal from the outside as he walks down through the Godswood, getting ready to board Caraxes and just take off because he's had enough of all these crazy Weirwood visions. Love the energy coming from Alice Rivers during their conversation here. She sort of Batmans herself into the scene like she just appears out of nowhere. They're kind of playing with that using a lot of practical camera work. I don't think that she's using special powers to just vanish in different places and appear in different places on the spot. They're just playing on the idea that Daemon has grown completely unhinged and just isn't paying attention that well. She jokes he wasn't going to say goodbye and he's taking off. She references the ghost of Harrenhal, calling it the ghost of Harren the Black, haunting him from the King's Spire Tower. That's the tower that Aegon the Conqueror destroyed. It's also the same tower that Daemon landed Caraxes on when he first arrived at Harrenhal. The ghost of Harrenhal was a local legend within the universe of Game of Thrones, like people around Harrenhal told that story, but it's also the title of one of the original Game of Thrones Season 2 episodes where Arya was naming all the different people for Jaqen H'ghar to kill around Harrenhal. They basically blamed all those mystery deaths that Jaqen H'ghar pulled off on the ghost of Harrenhal, like it was the ghost that did it. She taunts him for running at the first sign of difficulty. Dragonstone is a reference to episode 2, with him trying to steal the dragon egg. The Stepstones were a reference to season 1 when he went there to escape his brother Viserys again, who ordered him to Runestone, leading to Divorce Rock. Pentos was also meant to be the aftermath of that and everything that happened after episode 4.
There are older things in this world than you, or I, or living memory.
When she says there are older things in this world, she's talking mostly about the old gods and the children of the forest. Because remember, we're near the Godswood here. We're also standing right in front of the weirwood. There are weirwood roots growing all over the place. He's been sleeping in a weirwood bed, which he jokes about later. And the weirwood roots are slowly reclaiming the castle because the castle itself, Harrenhal, was built on a weirwood forest. So this is meant to be like one of the most magical places in Westeros. When she says he's not a player but a piece on the board, it just means that he's not the prince who was promised, so to speak, in so many words. He's just a foot soldier in the march towards the next long night, possibly on the side of good, but the idea is that Daemon could go either way. You never really know what he's going to do. She also says that she's like that as well, too, like I'm just a piece on the board being moved around. I think that's also meant to be a reference to the three-eyed raven who will eventually come around, like he hasn't been born yet in the timeline. She speaks both of Viserys and Rhaenyra not wanting the Iron Throne, but it came to them and they are doing or did their best in Viserys' case. When she says it's more about being a burden to bear, becoming the king, that's Aegon's prophecy about the Long Night. The idea that the king's real duty is to keep the realm united under threat of the next long night. Then he finally starts to break down and seems like he's starting to listen to her counsel, asking for her help in dealing with the River Lords, who reminds him that the Tullys are the most important piece in this chessboard, putting an army together in the Riverlands. He can't win the River Lords over without House Tully. And the key to that is the young boy Oscar Tully, grandson of Grover Tully, who's set to become the next lord after Grover dies. When her owl returns to her, that's just meant to pay off the joke about her telling him that she was an owl trapped in human form. It's possible because she descends from the first men in this area here, she is a warg, or she does have that ability. She then tells him to wait 3 days and things will change in his favor. The winds will change. Then we get the scene of Steffon Darkland trying to claim Sea Smoke. The Dragon Keepers are chanting this hymn in High Valyrian. It sounds like a traditional ceremony that they sing when anyone tries to claim a dragon. Like there's a special ceremony to it. And it sounds like they specifically wanted him to try and claim Sea Smoke, not any of the dragons. Like, it's not like they're singing him just waiting to see which dragon shows up. They were specifically targeting Sea Smoke. When he starts muttering under his breath, if you couldn't hear what he's saying, I think he's reciting his oath as the Kingsguard, just trying to find some strength in it. Then RIP, he winds up being burnt on the spot, and one of the Dragon Keepers as well, to set up the idea that just having Valyrian blood in your veins, Targaryen blood, isn't enough alone. So even though there are many people in the realm that they thought would qualify under similar basis or blood ties to the actual family itself, it's likely only a fraction of them would have a real chance of actually claiming a dragon. The dragons themselves are meant to be portrayed kind of like very large cats. The whole difference between cats and dogs, I think, is that dogs tend to cozy up to new people way quicker than cats do. Cats are way more standoffish, kind of like the dragons. But once a cat or a dragon becomes bonded to you, it becomes a very close bond. Then they transition to Adam Hole on Driftmark to set up him becoming Sea Smoke's next rider, which we see at the end of the episode. Very clever transition here, like straight from Sea Smoke burning someone to the other person who's going to be riding Sea Smoke. This scene winds up being more about Corlys selecting Alan Hole, his brother, as his first mate. They reveal both of them were his bastards previously. They also talk about that later in the episode, too. There are a couple of questions they answered about their two characters just in general in this episode, mostly to set up what's happening in the last 2 episodes of the season. When he mentions Lord Bar Amon, who's sending his young nephew as one of the crew members, his house rules from Sharp Point, just south of the Dragonstone and the Driftmark here. He's also one of the Blacks, like he supports Rhaenyra. Because they set him up as being one of Corlys's bastards, you can probably tell why Corlys is taking such an interest in him here, like why he's giving him such a big promotion on his ship, his personal flagship. It's him listening to what Rhaenys told him previously, saying that he should treat these boys more like his actual sons, lift them up, treat them with more honor. All to set up the idea that he will probably legitimize Alan Hull here, maybe his brother too. We'll see about his brother. It doesn't sound like he cares as much about Adam Hull. We haven't really seen any scenes of him with Adam, only scenes of him with Alan. So I do think he will legitimize Alan and just make him his heir to Driftmark eventually. There's a quick scene from Adam clocking their conversation too, like he's laughing at his brother, like, wouldn't you love this? This is a huge upgrade. This is going to be amazing for you. This is also to set up his storyline as well, the end of the episode when they pay that off with him becoming a dragon seed, because that also could potentially lead to him becoming legitimized and getting some actual titles given to him by Rhaenyra. Sort of like a similar situation with Daenerys legitimizing Gendry during the original Game of Thrones series. Either your father, the lord of your house, could legitimize you, or the current king or queen at any given time. Then we see one of the other dragon seeds, Ulf White. You can kind of see the theme here, like they're setting up all the dragon seeds in this episode, with Diana back at the tavern in Flea Bottom that he keeps going to, remarking about how there's little to no food. The woman we see is Sylvie, the woman from the brothel that Aemon had been going to visit this whole time, complaining about how the Greens are living it up in the Red Keep while the small folk are suffering and going foodless. It also sounds like she's pissed off at Aemon right now because she does mention the Prince Regent, like parties upon parties upon parties celebrating the Prince Regent. Even though it doesn't sound like Aemon himself is living it up, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of other people in the Red Keep are the ones that are actually having the parties. Ulf White remarks how Viserys would have never done something like this while he was king. Then they both agree that Rhaenyra should be the rightful heir, setting up his turn also becoming one of the Dragon Seeds and Rhaenyra's supporters. He said that in a previous episode too, like Rhaenyra was meant to be the rightful queen. Bartimos Celtigar wags his finger at Rhaenyra, pissing her off, doing a sort of I told you so, saying that he knew that this would happen to Steffon Darklyn. Rhaenyra didn't listen to any of his good ideas about how to win at Rook's Rest, implying that she also lost Rhaenys and Meleys because she didn't listen to him or her Black Council. She claps back, literally smacking him upside the head, which is kind of funny, giving off a little Visenya Targaryen energy. That was Maegor the Cruel's mother in Vhagar's original writer. There was a joke from Jace in last week's episode about how he hoped that she wasn't taking an example of how to be a queen from Visenya because she was so warlike. She was viewed as a much more stabby kind of queen. But that's also why she picks up the sword in the library right after this. They play a little bit of Daenerys' theme music during this scene too, because Daenerys was more warlike when she was coming up. Then we start getting more scenes of her with Mysaria, who tries to cool her down. I think this is all meant to be a long con that Mysaria is pulling, and it's meant to be a mirror for what Larys Strong is doing with Aegon later in the episode too. Like, both of them on both sides of the equation here with Rhaenyra and Aegon are trying to twist them around their fingers. But part of the conversation here, Rhaenyra tells her that she thinks that once everyone hears what happened to Steffon Darklyn, all the highborn people that would be capable of claiming a dragon on basis of blood alone wouldn't want to actually do it now just because they have so much to lose. But I think that's setting up the idea that all the lowborn bastards with Targaryen blood wouldn't have a problem risking their lives, because a lot of the dragon seeds are meant to be lowborn people, even though they're changing some of the book plot behind that. She also sets up the idea that the small folk are about to riot and it's time for their quote-unquote gift that they give later in the episode, pushing them over the edge to actual full-blown rioting in the streets to try and turn them against the Greens, so that potentially Aemon would have to fight a war on two fronts, just like he was talking about Daemon having to do the same thing. When she compliments Rhaenyra, saying that she looks good with a sword in her hand, that's just more of her twisting her around her finger a little bit, just saying what she thinks that Rhaenyra wants to hear, which is actually kind of true. Like, Rhaenyra does want to hear that she actually looks good as a warrior. Part of what I think Mysaria's long con here is all about survival. Like, she's just trying to survive, and she thinks her best shot is with Rhaenyra. So she's just telling Rhaenyra everything that she wants to hear because she's so frustrated at people thinking that she's incapable because she's a woman, how she always wanted to be born a man, how she never felt like she had any real intimacy with Daemon. So Mysaria's just like, oh, I'll just give her all the things that she thinks that she's not getting right now, and she'll think of me as her most trusted advisor. Larys Strong is kind of doing something similar, cozying up to Aegon, wrapping him around his finger, making him think that he needs him. Maybe Mysaria also knew about Rhaenyra's ambiguous sexuality when she was growing up and plays on that here too. I think a lot of them hooking up is also meant to be a reference back to Rhaenyra's relationship with Alicent when they were younger, sort of playing it as if Rhaenyra had an infatuation with Alicent. Then we see Ulf White with Hugh Hammer's wife together protesting the Greens. Aemond then seems like he doesn't really care about the small folk, even though he does want to break the blockade, which would fix all their current problems. There's a couple funny scenes where Larys Strong suggests himself as Hand of the King in a not-so-subtle manner, causing a bunch of eye-rolling at the table, Aemond getting pissed. When he mentions his distaste for lickspittles, that's a callback to his taunting of Aegon in High Valyrian, naming his friends to the Kingsguard, like I'm not going to do what my brother did. Then they pay it off with a joke about Larys Strong thinking that he's got the job, but him yanking it back from him, saying that he just wants him to summon Otto Hightower back to retake his post as Hand of the King. Like, I can trust my grandfather, but I can't trust you. The Grand Maester enters late, saying that Aegon is conscious again, setting up the reunion between Aemond and Aegon. He seems really afraid of him too, and remembers everything that happened with Aemond trying to kill him, but lies to Aemond, saying that he doesn't remember anything, like, I have no idea what happened. Wink, wink. And Aemond basically implies that he'll finish him off if he doesn't remember things correctly, like you tried to take on melees and it went badly, and that's it. That's the only thing you're going to remember, wink, wink, or else. Later when Larys Strong comes to visit him, they confirm some of these theories too. When Aemond says Aegon has a long recovery ahead of him, the idea is that he wants Aegon to stay away forever. Like, it's going to take you a long time, as in forever, to recover. Meaning that no one within the Greens will challenge Aemond for the Iron Throne. Then we get a big scene of Rhaena in the Vale paying off a bunch of fan theories. She talks to little Joffrey about their lot in life being sent away, still wanting to help during the Dance of the Dragons. Like, I guess that's the lot for us. What are we going to do about it? Suddenly seeing a giant field of burnt sheep and a huge dragon crying in the distance to reveal Sheepstealer, the wild dragon. That's why they transition straight to baby Aegon the Lesser with his dragon Stormcloud, which is tiny, Viserys II, whose dragon hasn't hatched yet, with all their toys of dragons, and Rhaena holding a dragon in frame to reference her claiming Sheepstealer. I think they're heavily foreshadowing things here for her character. Jane Eyre reveals Prince Reggio from Pentos, who we saw in Season 1, has agreed to Rhaenyra's request to shelter Aegon and Viserys and her, along with the dragon eggs that would come with them. Like, he really wants the dragon eggs, he doesn't really care about them. Then they talk about Sheepstealer, and the look on Jane Eyre's face makes it sound like she's actually trying to suggest that Rhaena claimed the dragon, like, yeah, it's out there, maybe you should do something about that. There are two other wild dragons that they talk about during the books in this period. There's the Cannibal, and it's called the Cannibal because it eats other dragons, and Grey Ghost. So maybe we'll see those two wild dragons in a future season, but I don't think we'll see them this season. I think the only wild dragon for now will just be Sheepstealer. This is about how big Sheepstealer is meant to be compared to the other dragons. Not quite as big as Vermithor, but really, really big. So that would make Daemon like the most proud father ever if she showed up on Sheepstealer. There are a couple big moments of foreshadowing here too with the rest of their conversation. When Jane Eyre mentions the Gay Abandon, that's a ship from the books for a really important plot involving the Battle of the Gullet. Maybe they'll do that in Season 3. If they do, we'll reference that when they bring that plot back into the actual story. But I think it's also meant to be a clever wink at Jane Eyre herself being a lesbian. There's also a little bit of that kind of action happening at the end of the episode too. Then we find out that Alan Hull has been shaving his head this whole time so people won't see his white hair, marking him as Corlys's bastard son and having Valyrian blood in his veins. A lot of people also wondered about this when they introduced those characters as brothers, and why, if his brother Adam is also Corlys's bastard and has Valyrian blood in his veins, why does he have brown hair instead of white hair too? The answer to that is probably the same reason why Jon Snow had Targaryen blood in his veins but also had brown hair. It's a bit of a callback to that Season 1 episode at the beginning where they said the seed is strong, the idea that that genetic trait is expressed over the trait for white hair. Rhaenyra then talks out her frustrations with Jace about everybody not taking her seriously, treating her like she's a weak because she's a woman wanting to fight. He reminds her that they need Daemon and Caraxes, which she also feels like is a slight against her, like, why can't I be the one to help? Why do I always need other people to protect me? Setting up Mysaria, cozying closer to her. She lets her know that their secret plot to leave the food for the small folk, causing them to riot more, is ready to go. They pay that off at Blackwater Bay with them finding all of her ships full of food bearing her red and black banner, so the small folk know that she's supporting them where the Greens do not. There's also a clever framing here with the colors of the apples, the green and the red apples, for Rhaenyra's side and the Greens. The other funny thing they do here too is when the camera pans out and you see all the ships coming into the bay, like the many ships, they play Daenerys' theme music. It's meant to be a parallel for Daenerys' ship sailing at the end of Season 6 coming to Westeros. Then we find out that Aegon is still sleeping most of the days in recovery, hopped up on Milk of the Poppy, but eventually he will recover, even if he's only at a fraction of his former self. Like, what is he going to be when he does recover? We find out that both Alicent and her brother, Gwaine Hightower, have been sending letters to Otto, their father, but haven't received any back from him yet. And we find out that the Beesburys have declared war on the Hightowers as retribution for the death of Lord Beesbury, who was beheaded by Criston Cole the night that they usurped Rhaenyra's crown. The way the Grand Maester says it too, it sounds like he was also pissed off at Criston Cole for killing Lord Beesbury. She meets with her brother in the courtyard before they depart for Harrenhal. They have a nice conversation where he tries to tell her that she did the best that she could with her older boys, Aemond and Aegon, but the Red Keep in general is just a terrible place to try and raise someone. Basically saying that it wasn't all her fault, like them turning out this way wasn't all on you. Then she references Daeron Targaryen, her fourth son with Viserys, who's 16 now. He has the dragon Tessarion, who's almost ready to fly. A lot of people asked in Season 1, when are they going to reference Daeron Targaryen, all the way up through the last couple of episodes until they started mentioning him on the regular. I think maybe to reveal that we'll see him in Season 3. Like, why would they be mentioning him so much if they weren't going to bring him to the show? The whole reason why we haven't seen him, Alicent kind of says it during this conversation, is that she sent him to foster down in Old Town as a ward, basically. Didn't want him being raised at the Red Keep. So he's basically been in the rich kid version of boarding school his whole life. Gwaine basically tells her, though, that he is a nice person, like he's a good person, possibly because he was not raised at the Red Keep, so you made a really good call there, sending him to Old Town. She does seem like she says a little goodbye to Criston Cole, like kind of a nod, like, all right, see you later, or whatever, but she's definitely done with him as a sort of relationship kind of level, like they're not going to be getting together anytime soon. Back in the Red Keep, we see Helena's upset that one of her bugs stopped singing. Alicent asks her to go to the Sept to pray with her, sort of setting up the riot scene later. Things start to boil over in the city, too, because of Rhaenyra's gift. Hugh Hammer, one of the other dragon seeds, finds Cheese's dog. We keep seeing his dog, who's none the worse for wear, but seems like it's okay. There've been a lot of you worried that they're going to try and eat that dog at some point, but it seems like it's okay. They found out about Rhaenyra's gift, everyone's running through the streets trying to snag some of it, and the riots essentially start. This causes Alicent and Helaena to be caught by the mob protesting the Greens, and it's sort of a callback to Season 1 with Joffrey being caught in the mob. They wind up killing one of the Kingsguard, and the scene where they push both of them up against the spikes might be a reference to Helena's story in the books, but I don't want to get too deep into that if it winds up being spoilers in future episodes, because we don't really know how they're going to change Helena's story from the actual books. But if you know, you know. When they pan out from the Sept, though, like they focus on the Sept in general, I think that's meant to be foreshadowing for the Shepherd character who we'll meet in a future season. He serves as sort of the same kind of role that the High Sparrow had during the original series, inciting the people to further riot against the nobles. Not just the Greens, but all nobles just in general. Then we get that scene with Larys Strong visiting Aegon, trying to cozy up to him, wrapping him around his finger. Like, one brother doesn't want to have anything to do with me, so I'm going to go to the next brother to try and cozy up to power. His whole line about writing himself into legend is taken directly from the books, like a copy-paste line. He uses both of their disabilities, their loss of the ability to walk, run the same way again, to bring them closer, like they're bonding over their physical issues, like people are gonna laugh at you, they laughed at me. Like I said, I think this is meant to be a ploy from Larys Strong just cozying up to power, and it's kind of the same situation for Mysaria, but using different tactics to do it for Rhaenyra. Notice how happy Larys Strong is when Aegon begs him for his help, like, I got him, he's mine. Daemon has another weirwood vision of Viserys crying over his wife Emma's dead body. This would still be during what would have been the events of Episode 1. The Silent Sisters in the background preparing her body to be burned per the Targaryen custom. When he says he's sorry for not being here when Viserys needed him as a brother, but he's here now, I think the idea is meant to be genuine. Like, he is turning a corner. They want to show that his character has come around a little bit. He's starting to finally learn from the messages that the visions are giving him, reckoning with his past misdeeds. Simon Strong interrupting him again, revealing that Grover Tully has died, paying off Alice Rivers' prophecy, so to speak, basically telling him just to wait 3 days and thinks it'd be fine, also kind of implying that Alice Rivers herself might have hastened Grover Tully's death because he kind of chuckles when he hears Simon Strong's story. The reason why he cries here is because it's meant to be the culmination of all these moral lessons that he's been absorbing from his visions. It's just taken him this long to actually learn anything from them. Then we get Sea Smoke coming to Adam Hull, selecting him as his new rider. So the joke is that people usually claim dragons, but here it's more like Sea Smoke claiming his rider. Rhaenyra then meets with Mysaria, learning that their plan worked, and part of the idea, like I said, is that Mysaria is playing on her anger over everyone inside her inner circle not supporting her. She also reveals more details about her relationship with Daemon and their history. She apparently idealized his wild nature and the fact that he was just a man in general, and he idealized her inheritance because he wanted the Iron Throne. So even though they were horny for each other, like just in general, they're horny people, theirs was meant to be more a marriage of convenience for the purposes of the alliance, not one for love, because it's kind of the way that she sold him on the marriage too. Daemon didn't want to get married to her. She's the one that had to convince him, like, I need you with me here. So part of the reason for their kiss here, like why they actually start hooking up, I think is Mysaria sensing that Rhaenyra is missing out on all this intimacy that she feels like she never got, in all this support, and she's like, I'll just give that to you. Why don't I support you the way that you feel like you're not getting it from anyone else? But it's not out of the goodness of her heart. Like, Mysaria isn't this amazing, wonderful person. She's just cozying up to power the same way that Larys Strong was. When she also jokes that it's Daemon's nature to disappear, that's another callback to what Alice Rivers told him, basically the exact same thing. The minute you have hard times, you just take off. She also reveals to Rhaenyra how she got the scars around her neck. I don't know if this is meant to be a lie or if it's true, because this isn't in the books. This is just something that they wrote on the actual show. She says her father abused her, impregnated her. Afterwards, when she eventually walked away from it, she was never able to have children again, meaning that Daemon's claims of her being pregnant in Season 1, Episode 2 were completely false. But part of the idea is that when you actually see them get intimate together, they play this very discordant, weird-sounding music, like it's meant to sound not good, like this is meant to be a bad thing. That's why I think they're trying to imply that Mysaria is just twisting Rhaenyra around her finger. Then one of the Kingsguard comes in, informing her that Adam Hull has claimed Sea Smoke, but they don't know that it's Adam Hull. They just say that someone has claimed the dragon, and she takes off on Syrax to potentially fight whoever claimed Sea Smoke, thinking that it's one of the Greens, like she's heading into what she thinks is an actual fight. But part of the idea is that we'll probably see her meet with Adam Hull, and he'll explain who he is, what his ties to Corlys Velaryon are, and she'll be overjoyed, like, oh, thank God, this is the best possible thing that could have happened. Setting up the idea of them looking for the other dragon seeds, because we have a couple other dragons like Vermithor, Silverwing, and obviously we have Rhaena with Sheepstealer up in the Vale, so there's still other dragons that they have to claim. But there was so much stuff going on in the episode. If there's any Easter eggs or references that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, or big questions you have about what happened, just write them below in the comments. My Episode 7 trailer video will post next, and my full Episode 7 video will post next Sunday after they release it. The other big reminder is that this week is going to be Comic-Con. There'll be a whole bunch of trailers, big Marvel Comic-Con panel, whole bunch of stuff going on. Deadpool and Wolverine is coming out, so I'll be doing a bunch of videos for that too, like post-credit scenes, full breakdown Easter eggs. It is going to be crazy this week. Make sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss any of that. Click here for that Episode 7 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post it, and click here for all my other House of the Dragon episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.